represent. I'll start to my right.
Carmen Santiago for the people.
Robin Field, residential lending.
Gabby Camacho, Affordable Housing Construction.
Linda Byers, resident.
And I'm Kevin Chenault, and I represent the nonprofit industry. Linda, this is your first meeting. We
Yes.
appreciate and welcome you to
Thank you.
the board,
Thank you.
and look forward to working together in the future.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you. Our first order of business is to approve the minutes of the board's May 9th, 2023 meeting. May I have a motion to approve item 2.1?
Move approval.
Okay. Do I have a second?
I second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 As the same.
Any opposed? None? Motion is carried. Is there anyone here to speak on items not on today's agenda? If so, please step towards the podium and state your name and spell your last name for the record. You'll have 3 minutes to speak on a subject that is not on today's agenda.
Good morning. My name is Beth Davis, D-A-V-I-S, and I am here to speak on the agenda. I hope in future meetings, the agenda here will include updates on past reports, that you will update the housing dashboard, reporting progress and updates, that you will report on each project that is coming up in the next 2 to 4 years with any updates on progress or delays, a status report, reporting on how our money's being spent this year. What is the progress on the work on MLK Junior Avenue renovations, for instance? They're going on now. How many rehab loans did we approve in the last month? How many rental assistance loans in the last month? In this year's budget, I know you have this sheet that you said last time you don't really like, and there's carryover money here, so why can't we spend it this year, perhaps? Beginning the solar for low-income houses that is expected by 2030 from the Sustainability Greenprint Plan. We have 7 years to do that. I think it's 20% of low-income housing is supposed to be solar and more affordable. Is that our budget or whose? That you would report on the housing plan for the Greenwood CRA. $14 million was approved. So who will execute that housing and when will it be presented to the board and the public? And that we would hear your request for the general fund. It's budget planning time, and we should, or it would be nice to know what the plan is for housing for this year's budget. And that we would look at the Forward Pinellas Summit Toolbox, Toolkit, eliminating minimum lot and unit sizes, reducing or eliminating minimum parking requirements, allowing increased densities for affordable housing, and it goes on. I would suggest that we have progress. It seems to be the most important issue in our community. I think communication also matters. We've suggested the hiring of 1 or 2 more people, and perhaps this is the kind of information a communication person on your team could help us be more effective with. And perhaps even an eviction person, somebody in charge of eviction tracking and helping, and some legal services on rental assistance. There's much to do on housing. Thank you. I hope the agenda gets more complete.
Good morning. Mohammed Abdul Rahim, ABDUR-RAHIM. I just want to ditto what Beth has actually said, so therefore I won't take up a lot of time. But one thing I do want to say, though, is thank you for being a resident representing this board. And also with Ms. Santiago. It's very important, that the residents be represented on this board. Primarily, when you're talking about NAHAB, NAHAB have basically been, industry and representing that industry or nonprofit status. But to actually have residents where we can talk to you as residents as to what the issues of housing is, it's very important. It's very important to actually hear what the residents are actually saying and to be able to absorb that information and then be able to make some action items. Now, we're getting ready to go into budget, and I'm looking at Denise because we want to be able to see a dashboard, as Beth has indicated, to actually see where money is being spent in housing. We want to actually be able to go online and look at the progress of what you say housing should be in the city of Clearwater. And I know we can do that. It's just a matter of you exercising your authority to staff to say, we will have this. And I do appreciate you if you do that. Thank you.
Good morning. My name is George Davis, DAVIS. I'm here to urge the Advisory Council to address the affordable housing, which is the gateway to homelessness and the homeless situation, with a little more energy and have it as the number one priority. By Mayor Onk's own admission, affordable housing and homelessness is the number one problem right now. Through your recommendations and understanding, which I'm sure you have, of the problems, the city is sitting on a lot of solutions to correct that situation. City-owned property that is vacant, zoning, coding, tax incentives for developers, because they're not going to jump in and spend the money to develop if they can't see a decent ROI. And there are ways to do that other than just handing them cash. There are at any time an average of 120 families, working families, mother, father working with children that are living in their cars here in the city of Clearwater. It's not a countywide, that's right here in Clearwater. We need help, and we need that attitude, and I think with your leadership through your recommendations and to keep it high on the city council's agenda, that we can solve some of those problems this year. I hope so. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Seeing no one else coming forward, we will move on to the next item on the agenda. Item 4.1 is a recommendation to the City Council approval of the fiscal year 2022-2023 annual action plan. Ms. Sanderson, will you please update us on that?
Of course, thank you. Good morning, Denise Sanderson, Economic Development and Housing. Let me get reoriented here so I can move things around. So, I'm going to walk you through a lengthy document that I'm sure everybody has read cover to cover. But for the benefit of those in the viewing public and present here today, I'm going to touch on some key, some important segments of this document that hopefully by the time we get to the end, all of this will make some sense to not only to us, but to the everyday person that's trying to understand what is really just a federally controlled process for us, right? So this annual action plan is required by HUD. This is the fourth year of the 5-year consolidated plan. And not that I really expect you all to remember the contents of our consolidated plan that is now 4 years old, but that 5-year plan sets the framework for how we will allocate funds over the 5-year time frame. So a lot of guesswork goes in on the front end because it's very, very difficult to predict the funding sources throughout that 5-year period. But the goals are established based on data that we collect during that process. We have to address certain national objectives within that consolidated plan. And then every year as we go through the annual action planning process, we identify we go revisit those goals, and we allocate funds that address those specific needs that we identified during that consolidated planning process. So here we are as we enter the 4th year of the 5-year plan. We're going to go through the anticipated resources, those 7 goals that were established in the plan and how we're addressing them. We'll get into the projects that you all heard about back in April and that we approved funding allocations for in May, and I'll point to where those projects are briefly described, and that's really for the benefit of the public out there where they can find some information about that. And then we'll wrap it up with what we're allocating or anticipating with affordable housing, along with some caveats that, that we'll speak to. So we're going to jump in here. This is the plan that was posted on the website. And I would like to mention that, unfortunately, my bad, I sent you all and posted in the NAHAB agenda a June 2nd or June 8th version of this, and it's actually the June 11th version. And the difference between these two versions is that we got notified of a change to our SHIP allocation and didn't catch it immediately, caught it before we published it for the 30-day comment period. I did not catch it and post the correct one to the NAHAB agenda. It has been publicly noticed properly, the correct version is on the city's website, and the correct version has been made available for the public to comment on, but for the version that we published for NAHAB. So your recommendation for today's action should reflect that amended change. We'll get to my recommendation of how that motion should carry forward. So the anticipated resources, and forgive me, I can't see a thing, I don't know what I'm doing. I need my glasses, hold on. Hold on, I'm just falling apart these days. I forget that I'm not as young as I used to be. So anticipated resources, this is on page 26 of the annual action plan. This basically walks you through the funding. So, forgive me, and it does correlate to the budget document, and I'll show you that in just a minute. Oops. All right, so we'll see here the CDBG home and SHIP dollars. Not ideally situated here for monitoring, for the monitor situation. But you'll see on the, I'll ask you to ignore column 8. There's 9 columns here. Column 8, that actually ties back to the consolidated plan that we make a lot of guesses about. 4 years ago, we said we expect this much money. HUD just wants us to know where we expect to be in terms of funding for next year. It's a bunch of hokum that next to the last column. It just ties back to the original consolidated plan and really has no bearing on anything that we're talking about today. It's just a self-populating figure, if you will. But the 4th column there, the expected amount available year 4 annual allocation, I don't know if you can see it on screen, but it's the first dollar figure you see on the left. $913,337 is our anticipated allocation for CDBG funds. That's the entitlement. That's a formula allocation. Below that is our home entitlement, $532,649, and our SHIP entitlement, and that did increase compared to the version that you all saw posted on the agenda. So this is $1,365,854. Next column gets into the program income. So program income is a repayment typically of loans that we put out there for construction, rehab, and the like, and mortgages. This comes in, and we refer to it as program income. You'll see those figures there, 1.27, 2.87, 475,000. And then the amount, expected amount is prior year resources. This is carryover. So it's very unusual for us to spend current year dollars. We're actually spending previous year dollars. A lot of what's in carryover is likely already encumbered, but until it's out the door, it shows up here as available resources. And then the expected amount, year 4, that's just the total of those 3 numbered columns. Altogether, 3.3, 5.88, and 1.84, that totals to the dollar amount you saw on your budget. And I'll pull this awful document up because it's difficult to understand and read. But this points to this figure right here. Let me scoot over. This 11.046319. That's what all of those dollar figures total. So it ties back to this in a number of different ways, but from an accounting perspective, you'll see that it equals. So that's a good thing, right? So getting back to where we're at here, these are the expected resources, carryover entitlement, and program income that give us the funds that we plan for in this annual action plan. And though the annual action plan is a HUD document, federal document, we include the state funds as well. What we have not included and it was our choice not to, is what we call ARPA funds. Those are actually no longer considered federal funds. Those are received as fiscal recovery funds. In other words, they're actually a general fund at this point. We're utilizing them in the spirit in which they were originally intended to put them out in the community in various ways. There's some internal spend, but as you know, we've received $3.3 million. The council allocated to the housing division for various affordable housing activities. They are not incorporated into this document. That was intentional because we just don't simply wish to muddy the waters here with federal stuff when it's really not a regulated funding source in the usual manner. So as we get into the projects, the 7 goals in funding, I skipped a section here. This is how we can spend our money. So they're numbered, sorry, I got a pop-up here. They're numbered here, this is on page 30 if you're following along. Starts with program administration. This is the amount of money that we can pull for the administration of these dollars. You'll see in again, I think there's 9 columns here. In the 8th column, how we've allocated this. CDBG home and ship, that's for program administration. And then it goes down to housing, homelessness. This homelessness figure does not include the general fund allocation. It doesn't get baked into this report. We anticipate that our general fund allocation will go from $250,000 a year to $300,000 this year, general fund allocation. It moves on down to non-homeless special needs. Our home and ship dollars, you'll see, are not incorporated into non-homeless special needs. Home is used for units, and as is ship. So it really is CDBG that gets allocated here. Community development, public services, same thing, CDBG funds. Whoop, pardon me. I'll click on the trigger. And then number 7, wanted to draw your attention here. This is emergency disaster response, and you'll see zeros allocated. So why is that in here? Because if we don't have it in here, we can't allocate if an emergency comes along. So think COVID, right? When COVID hit, we did not have this in our consolidated plan or annual action plan. We had to go back and do a substantial amendment so that we could spend the COVID dollars that came our way. We now include this in here and can allocate if we need to, and so that we can more quickly respond to a disaster of some sort, be it hurricane, pandemic, whatever it might be. So 7 goals here that we fund or reserve for funding. And then these get further baked into the projects table. So this is going to look pretty familiar in how this is generally laid out. You'll see general administration. These are all those things that were on that awful spreadsheet. These are those projects that came before you in April to present their applications. We have 28 here. You'll see at the very end we have TBDs. Those are reserved for projects that come along throughout the year that are not competitively applied for, and public facilities, infrastructure activities, economic development activities. You'll also see there's some funding up here somewhere for, no, that is public facilities and or, oh, good grief, sorry. Yikes. Let me get there. Public facilities and infrastructure activities. I'm sorry, that is in your budget as well, on that budget spreadsheet. And then on page 38 of the document starts this project funding. So I believe it's 38 through 42. You'll see all 28 of these here that are more specifically described, not fully described, but you'll see them here in this table. And obviously, there's a lot, in the 68-page document, there's a lot of narrative that surrounds all of this, but I figured the best way to kind of show you how all of this sort of gets baked together through review of these tables. So you see the dollars allocated for the different types of projects and programs, the target areas that we intend to serve citywide, low-mod income areas, etc. And then the number of housing units or other things, the outcomes that we anticipate. And then finally, I wanted to point out the affordable housing. And If you had looked really close in one of those other tables, you would have seen this figure as well. But this is the, when we look at housing, the vast majority, about 78% of of that $11 million is actually being allocated to housing. So that figure specifically, and that was up in the anticipated, in the 7 goals and funding section. The housing component is $8.7 million, right? So it's about almost 79% of that total allocation is anticipated resource dedicated to housing. And yet it looks like we're only going to be producing 187 units. We try to be conservative in this. I'd rather underpromise, overdeliver, and the like. Part of that is based on some of the realities that we are seeing here in certainly the real estate market and the trades market and the materials market. All of those things have severely impacted our ability to produce in a timely manner, and we find ourselves having to go out to rebids and the like. We're struggling to get contractors to bid on some of our lower level or lower cost projects. Single-family home rehabs, homeowner-occupied rehabs have been particularly challenging for us to get contractors to bid on those. They're much more attracted to new construction. They're easier projects to deliver on. Some of those kinds of things. So 187, we're looking at 60 of those in the rental assistance, 115 in the production of new units, acquisition of existing units. We've got 0 in the rehab of existing units. This 187 is really the federal funding allocation, but the reality is we're going to rehab a significant number of existing units, presumably. Now, I will share with you that while the annual action plan is an important document for us, and it's due to HUD by August 15th, what we put in here, we are not held accountable for how these dollars, what is actually spent. We're accountable for how they are spent. We're accountable for, are we focused on outcomes? Are we focused on goals that align with our funding sources? But do we have to hit every number? No. We have to respond to the market that's presented to us. And so throughout the year, you'll see monies shift in various ways. And when we take this to council for approval on Thursday next week, we'll be asking council to approve allowing us to be able to move those dollars within the different segments, because that's simply a necessary component. We have to be able to respond to the projects that are presented to us and the needs that come before us. So that's the annual action plan. In addition to the annual action plan is another 20 or so pages of attachments. That's the record of public notice of previous meetings. Minutes from this meeting will get incorporated into that, as will council meeting minutes. Any public comments that we will have received during the public comment period. And yesterday actually was the conclusion of the 30-day public comment period. We have 2 public hearings. This is the first of those 2 public hearings, and as I said, the council meeting next Thursday will comprise the second. Once approved by council, it will then all these documents will get incorporated as final. Any comments received will get noted into the attachments, into the record, and then it will be transmitted to HUD before the August 15th deadline. Funding becomes available for this plan on October 1. So we're already gearing up. We're doing our environmental review record it's a component of construction-related projects. Those processes are already underway for the public facilities projects that will be authorized on 10/1. We're working on the subrecipient agreements, reviewing the templates for those, and hope to have all those contracts executed by that 10/1 start date so that we can begin to move those monies out immediately thereafter. Happy to take any questions.
Any comments from the board?
I have a question
Yes, ma'am.
regarding leveraging.
Yes.
As you mentioned, SHIP is a leverage for CDBG and home. That gentleman mentioned the CRA.
Mhm.
Is there in the CRA plan any components for affordable housing?
There is. So we actually have, and Linda, you may not be aware of this just yet, we have 2 CRA areas now. We have the downtown CRA, which was expanded in 2004. That downtown CRA goes from here in the downtown area where we currently reside out to Highland Avenue, is bounded on the south side by Court and Chestnut, and on the north side generally by Drew, although there's some boundary changes along the way. So it's about 880 acres, and that's a well-funded CRA. The original CRA was born in 1984, I believe. So there's a good amount of money there, certainly. The new CRA was adopted in May by Pinellas County Board of County Commissioners, and that's the North Greenwood CRA. So that's a brand new CRA. As you might imagine, there's no TIF yet in that because the baseline has just been established. However, the city did allocate $5 million of our ARPA funding, the fiscal recovery funds, to the North Greenwood CRA. Of that $5 million, $1.4 million was authorized for expense prior to the establishment of the CRA. That $1.4 million was made available through a competitive grant process called the North Greenwood Community Grant Program, some of which address affordable housing. By and large, it's a number of nonprofit organizations and others that pose projects to us, a lot of public service type activities to be delivered in the North Greenwood community for populations that are viewed as risk or otherwise address some of the conditions of a CRA, like slum and blight and things of that nature. So the remaining $3.6 million has been baked into the CRA plan for the North Greenwood community. Much of that does address inherent issues associated with affordable housing. Jay Matthews is going to be here, actually, and this is part of my director's report, so it's fortuitous that you asked the question. Dr. Jay Matthews will be here in August to talk about the North Greenwood CRA and their goals to, or their efforts to align with economic community and community development activities and affordable housing activities, much of which resides in economic development and housing, and how we'll partner, particularly in the North Greenwood CRA area as we move forward there. But certainly it translates to the downtown and gateway CRA areas too. So she'll be here in August to give us some more insights there. She's been doing a lot of work to modify programs, existing programs in the downtown CRA, and is gearing up with staffing and otherwise for the North Greenwood CRA. So I imagine that will be an interesting discussion in August. Thank you. It's a good question.
Go ahead.
Sorry, I have a question.
Yes.
Is this information available online for the residents to view?
Yes, so other than it being posted incorrectly in the Neighborhood Affordable Housing Advisory Board agenda, the correct one is posted on the city's website. Anybody can go onto the city's website and just simply plug in affordable housing, scroll down to guiding plans and documents, and it will be posted there, as well as the public notice and how to comment. So we do have available in the NAHAB agenda, the e-comments has been turned on. I'm not certain if we received any. Thank you. And of course, with Council 2, e-comments are available there. So anybody unable to attend one of these meetings can certainly address those for the Council e-comment section if they choose to do so. So, I'm sorry?
I have one other question.
Yes, ma'am.
You talk about in the report, in the plan, about property owned by the city.
Yes.
Are those commercial, residential? What is the content of those? I think there were 8.
Yes, and actually, that's the affordable housing inventory list I believe you're referring to. They are city or CRA owned. I believe all of those that are on there currently are city owned. Most of those actually have already been donated for affordable housing, but that is the current adopted list. There's others, particularly surrounding Grant Street, that are surrounded by properties owned by Tampa Bay Neighborhood Housing Services that will likely pursue a multifamily development out there so that we can take advantage of some of the densities afforded. The property is a mix of both commercial and residential zoned properties, so we get some additional densities out there. We are going right now, we're reviewing the affordable housing inventory list to make updates to it. The Live Local Act has some components of that allow for affordable housing in non-residentially zoned areas, and so we're looking more broadly. Typically, we look at residentially zoned areas for affordable housing, certainly for the single-family infill. We do look sometimes at some of the commercial Depending on what the land use designation is, we'll look at some of the commercial city-owned properties for multifamily development. But now with the Live Local Act, it requires a different lens for us. We have to think and look more broadly. So that process is probably going to take us a little bit longer. I don't wish to get into my director's report at this time, but the Live Local Act does have some significant impacts in how we look at some things, and we can talk more fully about that in just a minute.
I've got two comments, questions. The first of which is if we could get an update from staff, whether it be quarterly or every 6 months, on the programs and projects that we're recommending in this, so that we can kind of see what's going on. I'm going to leave the time frame up to you. I know quarterly may be a little too often, knowing how these projects work, but it would be nice if we as a board got an update of what's going on with these projects that we're recommending. So maybe January, every January or February, if we could get an update, would be great for us.
I think that's a wonderful suggestion, and there's a few reasons why I think quarterly is probably a pretty awesome suggestion. And that is, we start in October, a quarterly update in January, which is just before we go out into our competitive grant cycle. I think it would be really helpful for you all to know who's performing as we get into the public services and public facilities application cycle, right? So who's performing out there? What kind of good works are they doing? Are they able to spend money? What's the challenge in spending those dollars? And then, so if we do in January, again in April, very timely, because in April we typically hear from these applicants, what are we buying, right? Are they performing? So I think quarterly is really great. I think it also is very helpful for you all to know what are the challenges for us in getting these dollars spent, particularly in the public facilities arena. There are a lot of hoops that we have to go through before we can even issue a notice to proceed. And so kind of understanding that process that's regulated by HUD in particular when it comes to bidding, environmental review, and all of those other wonderful things that Irene and Danya here just love to deal with every single day, and getting us to a point where we actually have a construction project underway. I think it would be really helpful to you to understand. And I think for the public as well, because I think there's this presumption, and I can understand certainly why, that once we make those dollars available 10/1, we should have all these public facilities projects going under construction 10/15. Wish that were to be true. We all wish that were to be true, and the reality is it's usually a minimum 3-month period before we can issue a notice to proceed because of all those other things that must come beforehand. So I think quarterly is a fantastic suggestion, and I'm certain Irene and Danya would love to stand at the podium and provide you with all sorts of details on a quarterly basis. Look at them, they're so excited.
Can't wait.
They can't wait.
My other comment was just a comment from when you commented about contractors not wanting to take challenging projects. I've made a note to maybe include that in our discussions as we look through the AHAC and see if there's any incentives or anything that we can do as a board or a committee at that point to encourage contractors to take on some of those challenging. So we'll keep that highlighted as we move forward through the process.
Great, wonderful, thank you.
Are there any comments from the public on this?
I would ask before we get to that,
Okay.
Kevin, when you do make a motion to recommend, that motion should reflect the following.
Okay.
I wanted to make sure I said it. Recommend council approval of the annual action plan as amended and dated June 11th. That would be the motion that I would ask of you. And now I'll step out of the way for any public comment.
Thank you. I don't know if this exists, but Beth Davis, the AVIS, is there a this year, last year comparison to be able to see what money totaled, was spent here versus today, and where are we improving and where have we left something behind? It's some context.
It does exist, and we can send it to you directly, but you can find it online as well.
You hadn't guessed already, I'm Mr. Beth Davis. I'd like to compliment you on the request for regular reports on the progress. All of us that have struggled with planning in our careers know that every plan has to be actionable and measurable. The frequency of the measurable part of it is important because it covers hiding out. If you have a plan and you don't have to report on it for another year or 6 months, things don't get done. If you know it's coming, just like the update on the 5-year plan, you get it done. So that's one good thing. And do it, please. Make your voice heard there so that this becomes the number one priority with using the CBDGs. Thank you.
No, if I'm allowed, I have one more question. May I have one more question? I was here when all the agencies presented what they'd like. And so I was thinking about St. Vincent de Paul, and I believe they asked for a lot of money to restore the front of their building on Cleveland. And it was not within this batch of money. And so in the economic development budget line here, does an agency who didn't get what they wanted out of that bucket have a chance to say, oh, but we have this money over here, and maybe we could do your facade for economic rehab? Is that possible? Do they get sent that way?
Yeah, I'll address that.
I said it badly, those of you who don't understand me, I'm sorry.
No, I think what you're referring to is the facade improvement project, and actually, let me look here real quickly. They do qualify for exterior rehab, and that is one of the projects that we have here in our public facilities project, so that is budgeted at $65,000. Yeah. So, but to answer the question, if there is a project that we cannot do or are unable to fund that is related to that, we do have CDBG facade to loan program, facade loan to grant program. It's currently available at $35,000. We're looking to, as a maximum loan. That converts to a grant over a 5-year period. So it reduces, the loan balance reduces 20% per year. It's a non-amortizing deferred loan. Nobody pays anything on it unless they cease doing business, leave the community, etc. Then we look to recapture those funds. But over the 5-year period, it does decrease 20% per year until it's fully converted to a grant after the completion of year 5. So Clearwater Brewing Company, some of you may be familiar with its location on North Fort Harrison. They were a recipient of that program as an example, and a successful recipient of it. They've just cleared the 5-year period, and we filed a lien satisfaction on that. We are looking to increase that program to $60,000, and one of the reasons for that is all of those things that I mentioned with the public facilities project, environmental review record, bids, Davis-Bacon, all of those requirements that make it very difficult exist within that program. So there's a lot of work to be done for a very small loan. So I would rather be more impactful. We certainly have the funds available for businesses. This is for businesses to take advantage of. We're looking to increase that to $60,000 and reduce the owner contribution to 10% of that note, meaning an owner would have to contribute $6,000 in order to fully access $60,000 in a loan to grant. That $6,000 does not have to be invested in the facade, however. So some of the things that we can do with the facade, the very limited things that we can do with that facade program are literally the facade. We can't do signage, we can't do parking, pavement, we can't do interior renovations, but the owner can, and that's considered part of their contribution. We will even go back and look up to 2 years prior for investments that they've made. Basically, we want to see that they're committed to their business success by putting their own skin in the game, making that investment in their facility. So we're looking to change that. I hope to be bringing that change forward soon. Keeping in mind as well the CRA, certainly in the downtown they have funds, and now North Glenwood, I'm certain there's some funds for that as well. They have a program that is I believe, similarly structured, and that is a facade loan to grant. Much easier. They don't have federal regulations sitting over them, so their process is usually much quicker. They have different criterion that they look at and different objectives because they're a CRA. But, so both those programs exist within the CRA area, but citywide, we can address facade programs if they're serving a low-mod income clientele or the businesses are located in a low-mod income area. And I'm going to close down my laptop here. It doesn't need that distraction. Thank you, Nicole.
Thank you.
So great question by Ms. Davis. I think it's important that we talk about it. It is sort of funded in here in the economic development activities. You'll see it in there. But the specific question about St. Vincent de Paul is in a public facilities budget. Okay? Thank you. You're very welcome.
Seeing no one else coming forward to comment on
Mr.
this.
Chairman.
Oh, come on forward, sorry. Thank you.
I just want to Abdul Rahim. I just want to compliment you guys. This is the first meeting I've actually been at that's been exciting. Thank you, Denise, for your report.
Deeply offended.
Please don't be offended. But I'm talking about engaged. The board has been engaged. I really appreciate it. I learned a lot. I'm going to go online, look at your full report. But I do thank you for that. You know, you got into a bit of the breakfast report, you know. But that's okay, because we learned a lot, and I appreciate you guys for engaging. That's what the public wants to see. The public wants to know that, you know, you are asking staff the right questions, and you did. So thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments? No other comments. We will move forward. May I have a motion on the recommendation to the City Council for approval of the 2022-2023 action plan as amended and dated June 11th? Okay, I have a motion, a second?
Second.
Okay. All in favor? Aye. And no, any opposed? No opposed. Motion carries unanimously. The next item on the agenda is the director's report. Ms. Sanderson, do you have anything additional to report to us this morning?
I do. Buckle in. Firstly, Linda, I'm so glad to have you here. I think, you know, your role as finance and rehab manager with the City of St. Pete, and certainly the work generally that St. Pete is doing, albeit different, you know, they're structured a little bit differently down there, of course. I think it will be really invaluable and help bring not only a countywide perspective, but a local government perspective that will be really helpful. At our last meeting, I said that I would plan to review with you at this meeting the key provisions of the Live Local Act. And while we have gotten legal review of the Live Local Act, there are some very significant components of that require thoughtful construct from planning and development. And that we are under the, you know, effective July 1. So we do need to respond to any applications received after July 1, but planning and development really is looking at how they will fully implement that, incorporating things into our community development code. So that, rather than bring that to this meeting, I really needed to understand better, and planning and development really needed to understand better how it will implement certain key provisions. So that is coming to you at our August meeting, and there's actually a big, huge agenda for August, which is great because it's just before our AHAC. So August, we will be bringing a resolution to seat the AHAC, the Affordable Housing Advisory Committee. And as you know, the 7 of you represent 7 of those 11 members on the Affordable Housing Advisory Committee. In addition to that, we have to include on the Affordable Housing Advisory Committee a member of the local planning agency, and in Clearwater, that's a member of the Community Development Board. Bruce Rector served on that last year and has agreed to serve again this year. An essential services representative, Jackie Rivera, a Clearwater Housing Authority, has agreed to serve in that role as well. She's been here the last several years. And a residential home building representative, Pierre Cornier, as you may recall, has served in that, and he confirmed that he's certainly willing to do so again this year. And then finally, we need to add a locally elected official, which is determined by council. I cannot make that recommendation to council, but as you know, Councilmember Beckman has served in that capacity for the last several years. So this Affordable Housing Advisory Committee used to be every 3 years. It is now legislation back in, I think, 2019, 2018, 2019, I don't know, COVID, whatever. Time has no meaning. It's now on an annual basis. So we convene September through December, and the purpose of the Affordable Housing Advisory Committee per state statute is to review our local housing incentive strategies, and those strategies are incorporated into our local housing assistance plan. So for you, as a good reminder, and for the many people in the public in here today, the Local Housing Assistance Plan is our state-required, Florida Housing Finance Corporation manages the SHIP funds. It's a state-required process and plan that addresses how we will spend our SHIP dollars. So the Affordable Housing Advisory Committee is a little bit narrower in focus in that it's required that we figure out how we're going to spend SHIP dollars in terms of how we will incentivize, et cetera. But like this plan does today, we also bring in, CDBG and home also go into some of those things. So it's a short-term committee that concludes this work and sunsets in December when we present the changes to the local housing incentive strategies in December. So we have to send that on up to the state in January. So that process will bring a resolution. Council will appoint the members to that, the 7 of you and the 4 others, in mid-August, and then we'll begin our work on September 12th at 9 o'clock. So as we have in years prior, the Affordable Housing Advisory Committee will begin in the slated spot for our NAHAB meetings, and upon conclusion of the AHAC committee, any business that needs to be brought forward to NAHAB will convene a NAHAB meeting immediately thereafter, since you'll all still be here, and do any business required of NAHAB, okay? Also in August, I'm going to be bringing to you a recommendation for a loan of $1.763 million in home funds. This is for the project at 306 South Washington. You all have seen that previously, about a year ago. That project has sort of had fits and starts in trying to get that funded. We're getting close to the finish line, I think. Clearwater Housing Authority and Peter Leach of Southport fame. You all have seen Peter before. Peter Leach is going to be the developer on that and take a developer fee, but Clearwater Housing Authority is going to be the owner, property manager, etc. This is going to be a mixed income, meaning affordable and workforce housing, 173 units, to be located at Washington and MLK here in the downtown area, the Gateway area. Some tax-exempt bonds are going to be floated for that, and this is really kind of what has lengthened the process, getting all of that bond underwriting work done. So the loan, the request for because materials and labor cost increases primarily, our loan was $880,000 the last time you all heard about this. It has since increased to $1.763 million. And it will also require an increase for the county's commitment as well. So this loan that we'll be bringing to you is going to be contingent upon the county approving funding as well. And as I mentioned, Dr. Jay Matthews, our CRA Executive Director, will also be here in August to talk about how the CRA will partner with us on economic community development activities and, of course, affordable housing, not only in the downtown CRA, but more specifically in North Greenwood CRA. Let's see, I feel like I've missed something. Oh, I should have mentioned Amanda Warner. You all come to know and love. She's with Wade Trim. She's going to be leading us through that AHAC process, the LHIS process that we're talking about. Actually, I think that's probably it. So a lot to talk about. The Live Local Act. CRA is going to talk about how they plan to engage us moving forward. We'll be talking about the Affordable Housing Advisory Committee, and we'll be talking about that 306 South Washington project. So a fair amount to talk about, but the timing is really great because it's just as we're heading into the AHAC work. And if any of you have become familiar with the Live Local Act, that will have some very significant impacts. It certainly has impacted the number and type of phone calls I've received. I think everybody that has ever built anything believes that they wish to get into affordable housing right now, which is an interesting and exciting challenge for us. Some of the questions have been so basic as what does area median income mean? So there's a lot of education that's going to be necessary. Affordable housing isn't quite as easy as everybody wishes it could be, but it will be interesting and exciting to see more developers come forward excited to implement some of the benefits that, or receive some of the benefits provided under the Live Local Act. So thank you very much. Happy to take any questions.
I have one quick question for you, and my memory may not be serving me correctly, but
Oh, we're in trouble.
I believe last month when you reported on the dashboard that it was not live yet.
It is still not live.
Okay.
Thank you for asking the question. And this is simply on me. As you all know, Chuck has been otherwise engaged. He is returning to us, I think, in end of July now, I'm hearing. And honestly, I just hope having him back at the helm, it will give us a little bit of flexibility. We've also been really wrapped up in getting this annual action plan compiled and presented to you. It sits on me. I really just need to write some narrative there that will give context for the data that people are reviewing, and it also will speak to current year activities. So some of the questions posed to you or suggestions posed to you and citizens to be heard today are very, very appropriate, certainly as it relates to the dashboard and having information readily available. That's really what the dashboard is intended to do, not only give a historical perspective or record of what we've been doing, but to give, I don't wish to say real time because I won't be updating it on a daily basis, but give an update of what it is that we're working on current year that I think is helpful to a public discussion. So sits on me. I had hoped to have it done by now. It's really just so many hours in the day.
The other comment was just a thank you for getting e-comments turned on for this meeting so that we could possibly get some comments from the public.
Yep.
I know that's a conversation we've had for the last couple months. Thank you.
Uh-huh.
Any others from the board? Thank you, Ms.
Thank you
Anderson.
so much.
Next item on the agenda is board members to be heard. I'll start from my right on any final comments for today.
I have a question. Do you have an update on resetting the times we meet for the board meetings?
I believe we had that conversation last month, and there was some budgetary issues with the city in allowing us to meet outside of business hours.
There are some challenges, thank you. So I believe what we decided to do was first turn on e-comments. There was some discussion about public engagement. Do they have an opportunity to engage and provide feedback? And then there was a question about timing. Is this a good time of day of week, et cetera, to have these meetings? Should we look at evening or other? And so we decided to take a sort of a multi-step approach. And first is to be e-comments. Does it really generate, are we able to generate the type of engagement, discussion, feedback that we'd like to see from the public on these very important issues vis-a-vis e-comments? Because there are some very significant and real challenges. We have 17 an innumerable number of advisory boards that require this type of setup, board reporters and the like. And so scheduling meetings, whether it's afternoons, other days, evenings, there are some logistical challenges in doing that. So whenever we make a change, we have to look at the broader structure of advisory boards to make sure that it would fit in a calendar, and of course at the staffing required. When we look at evenings, because of the library's hours, there's then the additional expense of having security personnel and the library, the facility itself remaining open. So there's a lot of things to consider, and so rather than take that step, we wish to look at other ways to increase our engagement with the public on these issues, e-comments being the first of those.
Any other? Okay, Robin?
I want to welcome Linda Byers to the
Thank you, Robin.
committee.
Thank you very much.
Anything?
No comments, thank you.
Anything?
I just want to thank everyone for coming today, especially. I hope we can fill this room as we move forward with the public. And I want to thank City Council for accepting my application to serve. Very much appreciated.
That will be noted in the minutes that they'll review.
And just also a thank you to everybody for the comments and the work, and especially city staff. We know that your department is short-staffed with Chuck being out for a while, and we appreciate all of your work, your whole department in keeping affordable housing to the forefront for us. So thank you on that. With no other items on the agenda, our next NAHAB meeting is scheduled for Tuesday, August 8th at 9 a.m. here in the council chambers in the main library. The meeting is adjourned. Thank you.